Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Supernatural Substation. I'm your host, Ellen Pastanio, and with me is my co host, Bernadine Richardson. Hey, Bernadine.
Hey everybody.
What's going on?
Well, the weather is starting to get really hot here.
Oh, my
I
God. It
don't
was,
know if I'm going to make it through the summer.
you got to, you got to.
Oh
What
my
was it by you
goodness.
today? Because it was 91 over here.
Yeah, about the same here.
Like a week ago or something, we had this front go through and it was like all cool at night and it had nice days. And then suddenly, bam,
Yeah.
summer's here. That's it. Boom, South Louisiana summer. And
Nothing
Jazz
is
Fest is
really
going on
hot.
right now. Jazz Fest is happening right now. I think this will be the last weekend coming up this weekend, and it gets hot just in time. Right, the first weekend
Right.
was kind of nice, but they had rain, and
Hmm.
then it was like, watch, it's going to be 80s, 90s. Heat indexes are coming, so I wouldn't be out there if you paid me to be out there, out in the heat, no cover, portalettes, lines for food. Nope, won't find me out there. Good grief. But, at least I have in dry weather, even if it's hot, because sometimes when it rains out there, it's like a mud pitorama out there. So, won't find me. But once, hey, we have that, and what do you call it? Hurricane season to look forward to. Now that we're in May, we only have a month to count down.
Yay.
Hey, yay, here we go, riding it till November. But anyway, yeah, so I don't know, we'll make it through, I guess. There's hopefully. They said they have a, what is it called? A El Nino or a La Nina, or that thing out in the Pacific that influences. Last year, we didn't have any hurricanes, not to speak of. I mean, not here in the Gulf. And it was hot, 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 and dry. I mean, we had a drought, but this year they're saying, oh, you know how they always predict there's going to be 15 or 14 or whatever the name storms, and then this. I'm not looking forward to hearing that. It just gets on my nerves because they
Yeah,
alarm
they
everybody
say
with it.
one thing and then it's another. I
Well,
think our
they
weather people are drunk.
every now and then it wakes up like what shows up, but what they tell you stuff like that at the beginning was going to be 9 major storms and this many. How did I don't know how they predict it, but why do they have to tell you that? Oh my god, there's going to be 14. I got to get bottles of water and all this crap
The
and then it
stores
never
get
comes your way.
crazy. Nothing on
Yeah,
the shelves. You fighting with people to get water.
that's when they know it's definitely coming. But even, I mean, they have PTSD from these last several storms. Like Ida was a bad storm and all. So as soon as hurricane season hits, it starts going scarce. It's people buying water, like you said, buying the one time a year when Vienna sausage and potted meat disappears from the shelves. I refuse. I refuse to eat it. It's a shame because when you grow up with hurricanes, it's like, oh, every now and then I get that craving for Vienna sausage. It's like the hurricane food. I won't eat the
You
potted
know,
meat.
I already have in my deep freezer, I have I freeze jugs of water. You know, when you run
Mhm.
out of your jug of water, you just fill it up, throw it in the freezer. Just
Mhm.
in case the power goes out, my freezer will still have gallon jugs of ice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I just use like empty cat litter bottles and fill them up for not for drinking water, but like, what stuff, like you go to the bathroom, you have that water and all. Then they have these things you can put in your tub and fill it up with water. It's called a water bob or something like that. We've never had to do that yet, knock on wood. So I'm not looking forward to it. It's like a contingency plan, and you always have to be ready. But at least it's not a hurricane, I mean, a tornado out of nowhere. I mean, you
Right.
have a little bit of warning with a hurricane. And it's not an earthquake, because we wouldn't know what
Yeah.
the hell to do if we had an earthquake down here. Uh,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
We
we
can't even
wouldn't
drive
know.
on the ice.
Right. We don't don't even go there. New Orleans is flooding though every time every
Yeah.
time there's a few inches of rain, even if it's somewhere else, they seem to the sewage and water board flood, just shuts down and the whole city floods. But so that's going to be fun to watch from a
Yeah.
distance. I mean, And we're talking about preparedness, but I can bet you they won't be prepared for anything down there. So it'll be disasters. And then they send their reporters out to stand there and
That
just,
is so hilarious. I'm sorry, it is. When
well,
I'm
yeah,
watching the Weather Channel and they have the hurricane and the man or the woman is normally this man and he's standing there and the wind, he could barely stand up. Like his umbrella will fly up, you
yeah.
know. You can't, everything, all the water's hitting him in the face at the same time. You can see the seas behind him fixing to crash. Like, I don't even know how he's standing without holding on to a pole or something. Like, you're waiting for him to just fly away.
They've caught them faking some of that too. Like they've caught them faking it every now and then. you know,
Really?
yeah. There's some footage out there, the Weather Channel faking it, and there's a guy bent over with his head down to the wind, and two guys in shorts walk past him, and it's like it's
Oh
just a
my God.
rainstorm. Yeah, you got to look at it. But yeah, our local channels will send them all out. They usually send them out, all them women, they dispatch all over the place, these female reporters, and they're like, oh my god, oh, here it is, look over here, this peeled off, or look over there's and they show you the sign in the street. It's like, I guess we're hurricane veterans. I
Yeah.
guess that's what
Waiting
it
for our
is.
cow to fly by.
We're jaded. Yeah, we don't. It's like, yeah, okay, standing there and drinking your cup of coffee, looking at it go by. It's like, yeah, all right, another hurricane. Seen a lot in our
Yeah.
time. Well, you know who else has hurricanes? Key West.
Yeah.
Key West has hurricanes. And that was a segue into, yes, we do have a guest in your future. Yes, listeners, we do have a guest. We have Mr. David Sloan. Now, he is sort of an expert on, does everybody like dolls? Dean, you like dolls?
I like dolls.
You like dolls. Okay,
I
well,
like
do we have to like this doll, because if we don't like him, and he'll he'll know it and we'll be in problems. So
Yes.
we're talking, of course, about Robert the Doll, and our guest is Mr. David Sloan. He's going to be joining us in a little bit, and he's one of the caretakers or the keepers of Robert the Doll. He's written a book about Robert the Doll, but he's also a haunted. He also runs haunted tours in Key West, and he knows all the great spots. We're going to talk about the Carl von Cosel and Elena Hoyos, whatever her name was, that he kept, took from the grave and kept, and did all those things. So David's going to tell us all about that, and he's had 25 years experience now. He was the first ghost tours in Key West, actually, and Key West is a really haunted town. A lot of people don't realize it, but they don't think about it that way. I mean, when I think of Key West, it's like vacation type. That's, even though I know it's like, yeah, I think beautiful water, great vacation. But
Key lime
apparently,
pie.
what? Oh, key lime pie.
Key lime pie.
Key lime pie, the mile high key lime pie. Yeah. So, but David's going to be joining us in a little bit to tell us some ghost stories about Key West, and tell us some of the most haunted locations, and all about everything you want to know about Robert the Doll. Welcome back to the Supernatural Substation. Our guest is David Sloan from Key West, Florida. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
David.
Great to have you
Yeah, it's great to be here.
in haunted Key West, another
Yeah.
spooky city. So I was looking at your bio, and I was talking about more than Robert the Doll. There's so much stuff going on in Key West. Key West is one of the most haunted cities in America, right?
It really is. I mean, it's right up there. It seems to me like all of the old seaports have so much going on. You know, you've got New Orleans, you've got Key West, you have St. Augustine, Charleston, Savannah. It's something about these seaport towns that have a lot of activity.
Well, so many people, I guess, pass through them, huh? And going to other places and coming from places.
I think a
I
lot of
get it.
people come through them. They've got the history for sure, and I think the style of people that came through had a lot of energy with them.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's the theories about water. You know, about water, salt. Stopping spirits from crossing over, water
Yeah.
charging spirits. So I think it's a combination of things.
Hmm. Yeah, and some people get they. I think that there's a little bit of an echo. I don't know if you can hear it, but if you do, I'm sorry. But a lot of people get there and they can't leave. They come on boats and they're brought over and stuff like that. Plus, in Key West and South Florida, you got hurricanes, so you got all that. Storms coming through over centuries. So there's a lot of dead there. Um, you know.
Yeah, and even the name Key West, it came from the Spanish Cayo Hueso, which means the island of bones. And
Oh yeah.
that name came because when settlers first started coming there, they found the island covered with bones and burial mounds, and they think they were from some indigenous tribes that were there. There's something really interesting. You mentioned hurricanes. A friend of mine, she had a new theory on how those bones actually got there, and she figured that the Calusa may have been visiting because it was a good fishing ground, and that a
Mhm.
hurricane snuck up on them, washed the bodies out in the first winds, and then the second winds brought them back in and left the bodies scattered across the island.
Wow.
And that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, not as colorful as some of the other ones, but yeah, it really does. So, they, I guess what I saw a show one time, and I guess when I thought about Key West, I just thought about like Jimmy Buffett and stuff like that. It was just sort of it was somewhere I wanted to go, and it was like an almost Caribbean destination. But then I saw the stories of Von Cosel, the cemetery. I get it. This is something stupid to admit, but I didn't even realize they had a cemetery in Key West. I'm like, they have a cemetery down there, and the water table must be really high, So, I mean, what's everybody talks about Robert the Doll in that case, but so tell us. I know you started ghost tours down there way back in '96, is what I read, and
Yeah.
so tell us about some of the highlights of Haunted Key West.
Well, it's pretty cool. And you were talking about the cemetery, and we already covered about the bones and how how the island got its name. But originally, they used to bury people in the dunes along the beach, and where the southernmost point is right now. They've got the big marker that everybody loves to come and have their picture taken in front of. A
Yeah.
lot of people don't realize that they're standing pretty much on an old cemetery, because all along that area, back part of where the military is, and then going all the way down past the first Martello fort, almost all the way to the East Martello where Robert the Doll is, there have been burials throughout the years all down there. And with one particular hurricane, it was so intense, it washed all the bodies up. It pushed them out of the ground, like you were saying, low water table. And you had caskets and bodies floating down the streets of Key West. And that was when
Like,
they moved the cemetery to the dead center of the island, because that was where the highest ground was.
yeah, it sounds like New Orleans in a hard rain.
Yeah,
You get a
yeah,
hard
and
rain down there, and
there's so
they're
many
just floating
similarities
out.
too. People
Hmm.
talk about the cemetery and they're like, "Oh wow, this is like New Orleans," because it's all above ground.
Yeah, well,
You
you
know,
have to for them to stay put. You got to put them in tombs and stuff like that. So, I don't know what year the story of Von Cosel took place, but obviously, well, let me let you go on because there's other things other than that. So let me let you go on with the hauntings.
yeah, sure. And it's interesting because when I moved to Key West to start a ghost tour, I'd seen one in Scotland, and they weren't a big thing in the United States. And a friend of mine, he said, "Hey, Key West is second oldest city in Florida, or one of the oldest cities. Why don't you come down and check it out? There's got to be ghosts." And I came down, and nobody was talking about them because in the early '90s, it was still a time when if you talked about ghosts, people would be like, "Okay, you're cuckoo." So the stories had kind of faded away, and no one was talking about them. And I went to the bars. I went to the library several times and found nothing. And then I was getting ready to leave after 2 weeks because I hadn't found a single ghost story. And I got in my car and I was getting ready to leave, and I got lost in Key West. And I was, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I quit my corporate job before that. And uh, then somebody appeared beside me in my car, and they said, "Go back to the library." And I looked at them and I said, "I don't know where the effing library is." And I looked up, like they disappeared. And I didn't even think it was strange that there was someone in my car. And there was a sign and it says, "Library parking only." So I pulled over and parked and I went in. And this time the historian was there, the Key West historian. And I asked him for a book on ghosts. And he said, "Oh, there are none." And as I started to walk out, he said, "Wait a minute." He said, "There's no books, but we've got ghosts." And he goes into this walk-in vault. It's a vault specially built to protect all the historic documents from storms and hurricanes. And he came back out with a file a couple of inches thick with newspaper clippings from the past 50 years, all about the hauntings on the island.
Wow.
And I started marking the locations on the map. And, I was making photocopies of the stuff. This is before cell phones. And then I went around and started knocking on people's doors. And you had the business owners at the different bed and breakfasts and different restaurants. And they had been there for 30 years. And they shared these incredible stories. And that's how it all started. It just became a passion for me, diving into the haunted history. And more than that, finding the legends. And then through the years, I've loved taking those legends and tracing them back to their true history and trying to find out, how much of it's accurate and where they've taken a turn. And to me, that's what's so fascinating about Key West. There's so much weird stuff.
Tell us some of it.
So one of the first places that I went was it was called Marrero Guest Mansion. And there was someone named Enriqueta who used to haunt there, who still does haunt there. And they say that, her husband had been murdered. The way they were talking about it then was that he was actually married to a few women. And that when he died, the first wife came back to contest the will. And so Enriqueta and her 8 children were all put out on the street. And when I went to talk to the owner there, he invited me in. And I walked in and the chandelier above the door just started swinging rapidly. Wow. And he looked up and he said, "She knows you're here." And then I interviewed him for about 2 hours. And then a pillow on the couch, it fell over onto my back. I kind of looked at it and I'm like, "Oh, that's weird." I propped it up where it wouldn't fall. It did it again. And then it happens a third time and I'm thinking, what the hell's going on here? And then boom, this light bulb exploded.
Oh.
And he looked at me, he said, "That's her sign. She's ready for you to leave." And I thought, that's unbelievable.
I'm pretty sure.
And then,
how we tell us that you don't know, like, get out, leave.
Yeah, and I know it's funny because I kept in contact with people who worked there for many, many years, and there was one guy. They were short on pool towels, and he said to one of the guests, he said, "It's Enriqueta's fault," and he was bringing out a fresh basket of towels. He said that he was picked up and thrown into the pool with all the fresh new towels.
Oh.
And he said that was his sign never to blame something on Enriqueta. So that
lady, huh?
Yeah. She has her house then.
Yeah.
I guess. Even though she couldn't have.
They say she stood on the porch and, as she was being kicked out, she said, "This is my house. What's happening is wrong, and I will always remain here in spirit."
Wow.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool. The thing I love about that one, I did a lot of research into the Marrero family, and it seems like he wasn't the bad guy that he was made out to be, and we found out that he was actually poisoned when he was in Havana, and it ties into this other conspiracy to take the house from her. And we think that this other wife was made up. And then I did the family tree with the help of my dad. He's a genealogist, and I started up a Facebook group, and it's become, it was Friends of Francisco Marrero, and a lot of Marrero grandchildren and great grandchildren started coming out of the woodwork. And so now there's this great group of all of them that's united, and we're able to share documents back and forth. And it turns out that no, they all didn't die horrible deaths on the street like the legend said. Some of them did. I mean, it was definitely a huge change for the family, but we were able to find out a lot of things, and even track down a photograph of Enriqueta from a family member. And to me, that's just amazing. And here's the other cool thing. When the guest house sold, they had a lot of artifacts from an archaeological dig, and it had been done right around where the outhouse was. So that, they'd throw old perfume bottles and toothbrushes and buttons and things like that into the outhouse. And they recovered all of those during the archaeological dig, and they used to be on display in the house. And the people who bought it didn't want it, and they were going to throw it away. And the former manager of the house called me and said, "Can you do something with this?" So I was able to rescue all of that and then go into the group of family members and send each of them a cool piece that tied into their family.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Awesome. We have some Marreros over here in Louisiana.
I bet there's a connection.
Yeah. A high school friend of mine, her mother was a Marrero. They're on what's called the West Bank. And
Okay.
there's even a town called Marrero,
Oh, wow.
Louisiana. Yeah, so that might be somewhere to look into. But yeah, I mean, coming along the coast, they probably, who knows? They've got to be
Yeah.
related,
And there was a lot of people traveled back and forth between New Orleans and Key West.
Yeah, because of the port.
There's that really strong connection there.
Yeah, so that might be something interesting for you to look into too.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that one on TV when they've done they do these ghosts of name the town, and I think I've seen that guest house one on TV. But I didn't know all that.
It's one of the more famous ones. Another guest house that I like. It used to be called the Eaton Lodge. It's changed names a few times, but with that one, it used to be owned by a doctor and his wife. It used to be the home of the doctor and his wife, and we'd stand out there and tell his story because people would have dreams of meeting a doctor or having surgeries, and the patients used to wait on the porch. But we started standing out there and we'd talk about him, and people started getting goosed. I mean, they'd be standing by this bush. We called it the poking bush because it was happening so much. And as soon as we started talking about him, he'd boom, and he just grabbed people right in the butt. And you should have seen the way that they jump. So that was always fantastic. And here's the interesting thing. I've had different guides who have worked with me through the years. The different ghosts respond differently to the different guides. And I think that's such a fascinating thing.
I think that's, well, we have, tours over here. They have a bunch of them. And I think that happens. They have some that they like and some that they don't. Like some of them they'll show up for legitimately, like they'll have some activity, some paranormal stuff. And then sometimes it's nothing. Most of the time it's nothing because a lot of it is fake lore, so it's really good that you're like sorting through, the myth, the legend, and, it just grows in fake lore, and you finally get to the history because, it's good to know. It's good to be scared and know a scary story and, or a shocking or whatever, but it's also good to know like the real story that's behind it. And then you can make up your mind. That's what I always say. Yeah. I mean, because, the history, sometimes the history though is stranger than the story.
Many times that the truth is stranger than the stories people tell. And I love legends too. I mean, they're a big part of our culture, and people love them. But with everything I do, if something's a legend, I try to make it very clear that it's a legend. And then whenever I can find out the facts behind it.
feel like a buzzkill though. Sometimes you go, "That's not true." They're not
Oh
buried
yeah,
there. And you're like,
yeah, because you'll find the tours. I mean, there's so many ghost tours out there nowadays. You will find
Mm.
some who just like make stuff up. Um,
Yeah, you have
but
to add one up.
which is always disappointing. Um, but yeah, and boy, New Orleans is quite the ghost tour town.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. And there's multiples, and they all tell the versions of the same story at every whatever, and they all go to the crown jewel, the Laurie house. I think they say for last, and so much
Yeah,
of the stuff. I mean, I'm not going to go off down the rabbit hole with that, but so much of that is just it's just boggles the mind. It's
yeah,
like, well, who thought this up? And I'm sure this is in Key West too. It started with like folklorists like George Washington Cable and even like Mark Twain, and just people traveling through, hearing the legend and writing something about it in their diary, and people taking that for like verbatim, historic accuracy, accurate history or something. And I think that's probably the case in Key West.
yeah. And we had Captain Tony, who was this incredible storyteller and a larger than life character. And the the tree in his bar, everybody will talk about it as the hanging tree. It's not to say that nobody was hanged there, and the place is definitely haunted. But he'd talk about 14 pirates being hanged there, and there's no records of that. A lot of people talk about the tombstone that's inside of his bar, and her name's Elvira, and they say that Elvira is one of the ladies who was hanged there. I was able to trace that tombstone back to New York from a small farmyard cemetery, and Elvira didn't die in Key West. She had nothing to do with Key West. So that was actually something that Tony brought down with him when he was up in New Jersey for a trip.
What is happening there? Who took her Dawn Star?
So I'm sorry, say that again. You
Yeah,
cut out.
she's mad as hell that her stone ended up. Well, maybe not now. Thinking New York, Key West. I guess I'd be okay with that.
Yeah,
Stone's
and
taking a vacation.
she's getting a lot more people paying her respects where she is. And I think a lot of times with those, when you see a tombstone that's been moved, because there is another one for Elvira that's been put in its place. So I think this one might have been broken or damaged. A lot of times, if they're damaged when they're at the stone cutter, those extras end up traveling around with people
Yeah,
when they're not actually a stolen grave, so to speak.
somebody
So,
took it and put it somewhere else. Yeah.
yeah.
So there are. I mean, there's so much we can't go over each of them. So, but there are the infamous cases that we mentioned, and anybody who has a fear of dolls should probably just tune out right now unless they want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that I find. Um, the Von Cosel, that one just creeps me out all the time. What went on with that, and so I guess let's talk about that, and we can save Robert. I mean, I've heard the whole strange story of this, and I don't know
Yeah.
how. You can tell us this how it started and how it turned out, but somehow at the end, this woman's body was put on display for all of Key West to see.
Yeah, and
After,
and it's kind of tragic. It's been painted as a love story, but the fact is there was a young Cuban girl. She was very sick. She had tuberculosis or
Mhm.
consumption, and when she went for treatment at the Marine Hospital, there was a much older man. He was from Germany, self-proclaimed X-ray technician, self-proclaimed count. His real name was Karl Tanzler, but he called himself Count Karl von Cosel. And he had this belief that he had seen her spirit before she was even born, that he was instructed by an ancestor to seek the world and find her and marry her. And he believed they were meant to be. So when she arrived and he found out she was dying, he's like, no, don't worry, I can take care of you. And, he started hitting her up with x-rays, x-raying her chest, believing that the radiation would help. It was probably making her sicker. And she didn't like him. He was creepy to her. But her family said, "Hey, he's treating you for free. You got to be nice to him." And she ended up dying. And he told the parents, "Oh, I want to build her a proper tomb. Let me take care of the embalming." And so he gave the funeral home instructions, and he built this elaborate crypt. He installed a phone so he could call her on rainy days, and he built it where he could stay inside with her.
Wait,
And he,
wait. What?
yeah,
Phone?
yeah, Oh, yeah, yeah. And he visited her pretty much every day for 2 years, believing he spoke to her spirit. And after 2 years, she said, Carl, the time is here. You must reunite my body with my soul.
Oh my
So,
God.
so he removes her inner casket. He had it sealed in a separate case, um, and then put her in a little wagon, brought her to the edge of the cemetery, and he pushes the casket over, and he kind of lost his footing, and it pinned him down. And all of this green ooze started leaking out all over his face. And he realized she hadn't been embalmed to his specifications. But that didn't stop him. He started rebuilding her.
Um,
And
Guess
and
the smell didn't bother him.
now, and he had these, so he took the bones and wired them together with piano wire, saved every scrap of her flesh that he could, and he'd wrapped that in rags with antiseptic. And then he wrapped her limbs with silk because it was as smooth to touch as her skin had been. And he reconstructed her face with like glass eyeballs and mortician's wax and plaster. And then he had saved her hair when it fell out during the radiation treatments. And he put that back on her head. And then he married her.
yeah, I heard that part.
Yeah,
He
and then
married her. Yeah.
and he spent 7 years with her. And the whole thing came to an end. You know, everybody will tell you that somebody spotted him dancing with her and notified the sister. But everything that I've found indicates that he was paying the family off, and then he stopped paying them. And they went to the police, and he got brought in for trial. And you know, this is one of the first events to really put Key West on the map for weird. And people from all over the world were coming, and half of them were saying, you know, this guy's a nut.
Well,
And
yeah.
then the other half were saying, this guy's such a romantic.
Oh.
So people were really divided, but the courts found him sane, and he couldn't be tried with grave robbing because the statute of limitations had expired. So the charge was wanton and willful destruction of a grave. And so he's found not guilty, he's found sane, and they let him go. And so he leaves Key West. And when he left, there was about an hour later, there was an explosion at her tomb. Her entire tomb just blew up. And, you know, some people say that's her spirit breaking free, but the reality is he set some dynamite on a timer because he wanted to show them what wanton destruction of a grave was. And then he went off to Zephyr Hills. He wrote his memoirs. They've been republished in a book called The Lost Diary of Count von Cosel. And
What?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just making noises over here going, oh, this story is so gross.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the book, I mean, the book goes into these details. It's a real step into his mind, which is just really bizarre. But he ended up dying in the 1950s. You know, this whole thing had been taking place in the 30s. And when he left, he moved in close to his living wife and family. But when they found him dead, he was lying next to a replica of Elena Hoyos. And here's where it gets interesting. So they'd put Elena's body on display in Key West, and they let the kids out of school. And about 6,800 people came to see her body.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, they broke her body up into little pieces and buried her in like an 18-inch long box. And there were 3 people who buried her, and it was done in secret, so nobody would ever know the location.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the chief of police and the cemetery sexton and I think somebody from the funeral home. So, but what's really interesting, after von Cosel died, there were some interviews in Key West with people who were involved, and the chief of police started talking about the replica of Elena, and that it was the replica that they buried. and that the real body was delivered to the Count.
My Jesus.
And then he immediately backtracked on that the following day and said he was misquoted.
Mm.
But it's some very suspicious stuff. And there's other accounts that talk about somebody feeling sorry for the Count and bringing the body up there. Now, when the Count was buried, he was buried with that replica of Elena.
Oh, jeez.
Now,
Or the real non-replica, depending on
yeah,
what you believe.
right. And then
I believe it was really her. I think they buried. Yeah.
I believe it was too. And I found a true crime magazine from the 1980s, very rare magazine. And this had this incredible account. Now, the Key West police, they don't maintain all their records for a long time. You know, under Florida law, you're allowed to purge documents. So they do not have any of their Elena Hoyos Count von Cosel documents anymore.
Oh, wow.
Nothing on that investigation. So this magazine article had great photos that were all from the police files. And it talked about a cottage being torn down in Key West, and the construction crew behind the wall found bottles that were marked poison and what looked like a confession note. So they called the police, according to this article, and the police determined that it was from Count von Cosel. And in the confession letter, he said that he had poisoned Elena because she wasn't dying quick enough from the radiation,
Oh, my
and he wanted to
geez.
be with her. And he talks about giving her vitamin shots in his journal. So, so I think he was actually poisoning her. So
Oh,
you don't have this guy who was in love and taking care of someone. You pretty much had a predator, possibly a serial killer, and he murdered her. And what's even worse is I think there's a good possibility that his victim is buried in his grave.
yeah. Yeah.
And you know, the tombstone that exploded, that's up at the museum where Robert the Doll is. It's in the room right next door. And that's the last really tangible connection to Elena Hoyos that exists. And
Yeah.
we'll tell that story in there, and people on the tour will sometimes start crying because they're overwhelmed with this sadness.
It is.
And
Absolutely is a sad story.
yeah, especially if someone's pregnant, you know, because Elena she had a miscarriage just before she became ill. If someone's pregnant, then that sadness always comes right over them. They can feel such an intense energy. And we think that might be Elena's spirit coming out. And here's where it gets, I mean, just when you think it can't get any weirder, when that happens, we'll hear somebody further down in the fort. We'll hear footsteps coming towards us like something's angry. And we've had this large display right by Elena's grave. It's like a huge print of the cemetery, but it's heavy. We've had that fly up and fly into the room. We think
wow.
that's von Cossel's spirit. And I think he's mad that she's there.
Not with him.
And that she's not with him. And that's him when he discovers it. That's his spirit coming and trying to drag her back.
Okay. All right. This is just horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible from the start. Now, she was pregnant? You said...
she was pregnant.
Was she married?
She was married to Louis Mesa.
Oh, okay. When she started to go to Von Cosel to see him, she was married already.
He had left before that because so they were married. They were expecting a baby, and she had a miscarriage. And after the miscarriage, he left her.
Oh, well.
And then she became very ill. So I mean, it was pretty tragic. I mean, she was.
And they put her, because I've seen the pictures of, I mean, anybody who's into the paranormal or history. It was just the horrible, what he did her face, and it was just terrible, but I can't believe that. I don't know, I guess I can. I mean, back in, the medieval times, crowds used to show up for executions and all, and it was like, it was like a festival atmosphere.
Mhm.
So I guess everybody would show up for the curiosity of looking at the corpse, and seeing it. But to have, I mean, that's a terrible, that's terrible. I mean, just to happen to this poor woman,
Yeah,
she couldn't rest in peace at all.
yeah,
What is that
yeah.
disorder
It's
or
What
persons that obsess about corpses? I can't remember the disorder name.
the
necrophiliacs?
necrophiliacs. Yeah,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, maybe he had that.
Oh, he had that because confirm this for me, David. He had a full marital relationship. Am I correct? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And
He.
that didn't come out at the time, but the doctors who examined her body later revealed that there was a
Mm,
cardboard tube, basically like a paper towel tube that was stuffed with cotton, and that they found traces of him in
yeah.
there.
That's sick. And this man was running around loose and calling himself a doctor. Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
And it's interesting because I've read so many accounts of him, and talked to people whose parents knew him, and he was very smart, and he was
Mhm,
very likable, and he was very exotic as well. I mean, he was a German count. He had been in he had been in an Australian prison. He built all these devices himself. He built this elaborate organ that he used to play songs for her on, and so people liked him,
mhm,
and he had money too. He was getting a pension from something he had done in Germany,
mhm.
and though he didn't have the credentials, it wasn't like he didn't know what he was doing. By all accounts, he was very smart, very charming, and
And,
you'd have to think in Key West at the time too.
mhm,
Key West wasn't the big
right.
vacation destination, and it was an island where people were working to get by.
Yeah,
You know,
they would look up to him, and they would have respect for him because he was, first of all, possibly royalty or close to
mhm.
noble, and then he was intelligent, and more than them, and then he was personable, and then he could cure them. I mean, if he was treating them as a doctor, so that automatically he became respected in the community. So nobody would suspect anything about him.
Yep,
That he was
yep.
capable of such a. That's sick. I don't know. I mean, do you agree? He's having dreams about. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to, I don't think I can add to it. Just dreaming about this girl, and then that's a horrible thing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And when you read his diary, the step into his mind is fascinating, and it makes you think, "Oh wow, this this guy's peculiar." But oh, you kind of see, how in love he
It
is.
makes sense, yeah. And he's in love, and it's romantic. I don't know how this hasn't been a movie yet. So somebody should
I
take
know.
those, I know, and make that. And somebody was talking about that at some
Yeah,
point. I
I
think
think
I
it'll happen
heard.
when it's the right time, because
Hmm.
through the years, I've probably talked to 15 or 20 people who are going to make the movie about it.
Hmm.
And I get the feeling that nothing's going to happen until Elena approves of the story.
And approves of who's going to play her and everybody else.
Well, and I think of how the story's told, because it's always been told as a love story. But this is someone who was a victim,
Hmm.
and
Her
and
husband
I feel like she almost curses anybody who tries to do the project. Um, so I mean, there's been some cool
And
stuff done. Ben Harrison, he's an author in Key West who was the first to really dive deep into the Elena Hoyo story, and he wrote a book called Undying Love. And it's a brilliant book, and he did a musical about the story. And I think somebody from Europe did a musical about it too. But yeah, I mean that would be incredible on the big screen
play
when
him.
Elaine is ready.
Yeah, I don't know who would play him. Maybe, well, I'd say Jude Law, but he's getting a little long in the tooth. No, not Jude. Yeah, yeah, Jude Law. Okay, I thought I said Julian Sands for a minute, but he died. So maybe him or one of the Scars guards or something like that. I mean, I just don't know how. but it'll be made, I guess, eventually.
Yeah.
It's a shameful thing, but she's making up for it, I guess, from the other side. So
Yeah. I hope that she is.
she will pick and choose, I guess, who's going
Mm-hmm.
to be in it. I don't know. I guess when you got people on these little islands, you just kind of go crazy.
Right?
I mean, okay, and the families over there probably being paid off. So I
Yeah.
guess they had no problem whatsoever. I guess they just didn't allow themselves to think about it. Just take the money and whatever. But
And
I guess I would go
and
ahead.
they probably didn't think he was doing what he was doing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I guess they thought he wanted it around like as some sort of statue or something, or like a
Yeah.
mummy or something.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't know. That's there are people who that there was someone that we knew of that called herself a neck romantic and would sleep with bones and just
Mm-hmm.
skulls and bones and all that, and because she was communing with the angel of death, which
Mm.
she gave a name to and all that other stuff. So I just don't know how you get how you get to a point where that's bad enough, sleeping with it and all, but some of the things that he did to her, I just don't know how you get to that point. He had to be crazy.
I don't know. I think we all vibrate on different levels, and I think some people tune into one of these alternate worlds that's out there, where maybe that's okay. I don't really know what to make of it.
Well, because you're sane, and you don't have that kind of, you don't have the
I don't
kind
want to
of.
go that far.
Well, no, I mean, but you're more
I,
sane. Okay, all right. Well,
I talk to a doll.
now we'll get to him in a minute. But yeah, I mean, but compared to the, well, that's true, because look at him. Look at the Count, right? He's totally. I mean, he lives every day among people, or he lived and he worked, and everybody knew him. So I imagine the fallout was tremendous, and they just wanted him to leave. So here, take the corpse and go. Then just leave town, get away, and he blew up
And
his own tomb, I guess. But I don't
Yeah,
know.
and it was interesting because he didn't leave right away, and he had a couple of places he lived. He had this giant wingless airplane that he believed he was going to fly her spirit up to the heavens in, and he used to move her around in that. And then he moved into an old slaughterhouse on one of the beaches in Key West, and that's where he spent most of his time. And then he ended up
Mm.
further on the other side of the island towards the end. But he didn't leave right after he was let out. He spent some time, and people were coming down and they'd go visit him, and he'd sign autographs for them, and he'd tell the story, and they'd give him change. Uh, so so he
Oh, well, I guess because it was down there, somewhere further up in Florida, he might have had some visitors in the night.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
coming down
yeah.
out of the hills, going, "Okay, dude, you know,
Yeah,
tell us
yeah,
that story again."
right.
So, Bernadine had a question. So Dean, go on, come on in here.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can too.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I had asked the question. My mic was low for some reason. Um, the Count, whenever he had the body and all that, and they found him that he had her body. Whatever happened with her husband that she had been pregnant for, was he alive whenever they found the body with the Count?
Yeah, he was alive. He had moved to Miami, and I believe he was working in restaurants there. But I've kind of lost track of what happened to him because I spent some time trying to track down any family members who might still be around who could share some of their insight. I could not locate anybody on Elena's side or her husband's. So it seems like best I can tell that side of the family is no longer around. On von Cossel's side or Tansler's side, he still has some descendants, and they understandably don't want to talk about it. Because they've spent their lives being hounded by the press and hounded by people, and you know, uh, to them, his family.
Right.
And
Right.
I wouldn't stand anybody talking things about my family.
Mhm.
So, I haven't tried to make any contact with them because I think they probably just want to be left alone.
Right.
Go by that same name, by obviously not Castle, but Tanzer.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, and they may even be going by something different now.
Well, I mean, he was, I don't know, I guess a high functioning sociopath, a high functioning, I don't know if it's psychopathy or what that is, it wasn't real necrophilia because he stuck to just that one person, as far as you know, right? As far as we know, he
Yeah.
wasn't, haunting the graveyard and, still you turn me on stuff,
Yeah.
so he stuck to the one, and that's, I guess, why people say, oh, he loved her, love never dies. Let's coin that phrase.
Yeah,
Love
but you
never
never know what
dies.
happened in other places.
Yeah, why do you think what makes you think he was a serial killer? Do you
Well,
connect him to anything else, or?
I just think some of those behaviors.
Mhm.
It somebody had actually contacted me
Mm.
and suggested it. So that wasn't my theory. They suggested it, and based on the poisoning, that's what makes you start thinking it. So
Yeah.
he wasn't just caring for her and then engaging in living with her. Uh, I mean, if the poisoning account is true, then he killed her. And I think if you're poisoning someone, if you poison one person, you might be poisoning another.
Mhm.
Um, and he had a daughter who died, and that was what they were wondering is whether he might have poisoned her. And I have no idea if that's the case or not. I really don't know. Um, I was looking for other poisonings that happened in Key West around the same time. And I found some dogs that were poisoned, but I don't. I think it's a jump to attach him to that.
Right.
But
The dogs that were poisoned from they had the records of dogs being poisoned like in the
yeah,
1930s.
yeah. There was an article in the newspaper.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
like a local papers do those kind of
yeah,
things. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
And a lot of the stories from a lot of the newspapers from Key West are missing. A lot of the records are gone. Some were lost in floods or fires or storms.
mhm.
So we don't have everything, but new stuff resurfaces frequently. And the online archives, there's some good stuff with the Key West Citizen. But then with things before that, the library has the good archives.
Mm.
But it can be time consuming going in and going through the microfiche and uh, and those
Then
types of
looking.
things.
Mhm.
But I bet there's some gems hidden there. So I don't think the story's over. I think so many of these stories, there's just more information waiting to come out. And if we keep digging, it will come out in time.
Always.
No,
I mean,
and I
if you
like Key
follow
West.
that.
I like
Mhm.
US because a lot of times other papers reported the stuff. There was a time when a lot of the stuff was being reported in Tallahassee newspapers, and then the Miami Herald covered a lot of the Florida Keys for a while. So
Mm.
there are different sources.
I bet they caught that story probably and published it.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
That one went all over the world. They were
Good.
talking about it over in Europe. They were talking about it in Canada and everywhere. Absolutely everywhere.
Anybody who knew him must have been like, I can't believe. Or some people were like, I knew it. I knew
Yeah,
he's crazy. So,
yeah,
well, that brings us, I guess, to another sort of craziness: the Eugene Otto and Robert the Doll. I was listening to you on Misty's show, and you seem to have a good relationship with Robert. And I
yeah.
understand that that's important. From what I've looked into Robert, it's important to have a good relationship with him. So,
Yeah, you don't want to get on his bad side.
no, I sure don't. That's why I know. So, but I'm sure so many listeners have heard the story, but there might be some who don't, and they obviously don't know it from your perspective. So, tell us the story of Eugene and Robert the Doll and how it all began.
Yeah, Robert is a Steiff doll. He was made by the Steiff Company in Germany around 1904. He's the size of a small child. He's what, about 3.5, 4 feet tall. He's dressed in a sailor suit. Originally, he was a clown, and he was given as a gift to a boy named Gene Otto, who was living in Key West. We believe it was a gift from his mother. The Otto family, Otto's German. They used to travel over. I think she brought the doll back, gave it to him on his 4th birthday, and he developed this attraction, or this connection with the doll, and gave it his own name, Robert, and went by his middle name, Gene, for the rest of his life. And accounts say that they were inseparable. And whenever Gene got in trouble for anything, he'd say, "I didn't do it, Robert did it." And he blamed the doll. And his parents used to hear 2 distinct voices coming from his room when they went to check. They'd go in there and it was only Gene and the doll. They say the servant used to get pushed into the closet and the door would be held shut. And when she got out, Gene would say, "I didn't do it. Robert did it." So, this goes on through his childhood. Then the doll gets locked in the attic when Gene goes off to see the world. He wanted to be an artist, so he went to France. And when he's there, he meets his wife, well, the woman who would become his wife, and they get married. They live in Europe for a while, New York for a while, and then when they're in their 40s, when he was like, I think 42, they came back to his childhood home when his mom was sick, and she died, and they decided to stay and make their life there in his childhood home. And everything was okay until he calls his wife into his studio and he says, "Honey, I want you to meet my best friend from growing up." And when she goes into the room, it's just him and Robert the doll.
Wasn't that like put away or locked away?
Yeah, he had been locked away in the little cedar chest in the attic for all that time. And they say that Anne hated the doll. The whole dynamic changed as soon as they got in the house with that doll. And Gene became abusive towards Anne, verbally at the very least. But, he'd do art shows and he didn't want her stealing his glory. So he'd make her wait outside for 10 minutes before she came in. And he wouldn't let her play piano anymore. He didn't want her playing at the church because she was so good at it. Mm-hmm. So things kind of took this dark turn. And they say he used to push her into the little closet under the stairs upstairs. And when confronted with the abuse, he'd say, same thing. "I didn't do it. Robert did it." And then he got sick and died. He had Parkinson's disease. And he spent his last 10 years up in this turret that used to be his playroom. And it was just him and Robert the doll. And school kids used to come by and they'd see Robert the doll moving around on the window on his own with Gene painting by his side. And so then Gene dies. He cut Anne out of the will. And terrible. She said, yeah. I mean, it was all pretty messed up. She travels she moves in with her sister up in Boston. The house was rented out for a little bit. Everybody who stayed there had bad things happen with Robert the doll. One guy claimed that he was locked in the attic and given yellow fever. A plumber saw Robert moving on his own and giggling. Just all types of weird stuff. And then the house was sold. And Myrtle Reuter ended up buying it. But I talked to their neighbor, Bill Geiser, who was good friends with them. And he actually bought the house for Myrtle. So I asked him, I said, did you say anything about Robert? He said, "I hate that doll." He said, "I should have burned him." He said, wow. He said, the things that it's done to my friend Anne. And then he told me, he said, Robert was in the cedar chest when I bought the house. And I said, "Oh, do I get him too?" And he said that Anne looked at him and said, "I hate that effing doll. It was Gene's best friend." Of course, he never could make any friends of his own. Mm-hmm. So then more people start coming into the house, people who had been going by as kids, seeing Robert in the window. And they'd go to visit the doll, and there were just stories all over the place. And Myrtle Reuter, who had the doll, I mean, I talked to some of her family, and they said that after she got Robert, she changed. The doll definitely had an effect on her too. And then, she had a death in the family. She had a divorce. They sold the home, and she moved to somewhere else in Key West and took Robert with her.
Mhm.
And it was 1994. She burst in through the front doors of the Fort East Martello. It's a museum with a lot of Key West history. And she said to the curator, she goes, "This is Robert the doll. He belonged to Gene Otto and he's haunted. I need you to take him." And
No.
they filled, so they filled out the paperwork and they took the doll, but they didn't put him on display. They just put him in a back room, covered him up with a sheet. And the employees started having weird things happen. The employees swore that he was moving. They made a chalk circle around him. One of the guys made a chalk circle, and they all left for the night. When they came back in the next morning, Robert had moved outside of the circle.
Believe it.
And then, so in '96, when I started ghost tours, I started sending people. We'd stop at the auto home, and I'd tell people, "You got to call the museum, ask them to bring Robert out for you." And enough people started calling that they put him out on display. And it was a little display case, and people started having things with batteries drain. So like cameras, the batteries would drain. Pacemakers were having problems. People would get their pictures of Key West developed. Nothing would turn out except the photos of Robert.
Only his photos.
Say that again. You cut out on me.
I'm sorry. I said I read that. Only his photos on a whole roll of film had come out when they had it developed.
Yeah, there was a friend of mine who had a photo developing place, and it was the main one in Key West. And he started asking people if they had any photos of Robert on their film, because his machine would get stuck on Robert photos and just keep printing Robert.
Well, kind of like his owner, he wanted all the glory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good observation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool.
I'm sorry, David. I was just going to ask about Miss Reuter. I was reading that she got locked in a room, like it was only her and the doll in the house.
Yeah,
and that's kind of like what was the last straw where she took it to the museum. But he locked her in a room in her house, and it was only them in the house.
And that's just like what he did with the servant, just like what Gene did with the servant, just like what Gene did with his wife when he blamed it on the doll. And here it's just Reuter and the doll, and that's happening.
Yeah, and I read that was when she said, "That's it."
Yeah, and I think she encountered what I did. Everybody thought Robert was an evil doll, and I always thought Robert was just one entity, right? Like one spirit. And then when I was writing the book about him, I started having all these horrible things happen, and I thought, because what I did is I traced some of the legends back, and everybody always said he was given to the boy by an angry nanny or an angry servant that was attached to the family. I found the angry nanny. Her name was Emmeline Abbott, and her and her husband were servants of the Ottos. And I found a legal notice where after Dr. Otto died, she filed a lawsuit against the estate of the doctor. And I also found that in 1900, she had no children. In the 1910 census, she shows no children living, one child dead. So in that 10-year period that Robert arrived, she lost a kid. When her kid was sick or injured, she would have gone to the doctor she worked for, which was Gene's father. And I believe that, what I've gathered from different psychics who have been there, they say that she wanted the family to feel the pain that she felt, and because she blamed them for not saving her child. And that she sought out a voodoo practitioner and had a spell put on the family, or a curse put on the family, that manifested within the doll. And people who visit the doll now say that there's a portal inside of the doll. And I had realized a while back that we were dealing with multiple spirits, because I believe the child is the true spirit. That's the one I try to nurture. But there's these other ones who have filled in. So whenever somebody disrespects the doll, the child, it's almost like the child tags them with this sticky tar. And then these protectors, there's like these 2 8-foot tall creatures, and they'll latch on to the people who are disrespectful, and they'll follow them home, and they'll be the ones who, push them down the stairs and leave dead deer in their yard, and make them lose their jobs, and struck by lightning, all of these things. And the only way to get them to leave you and return back to the doll is to apologize to Robert, which is the child. And I think that makes so much sense to me, because you'll have hundreds of people at the same time experiencing a curse from Robert. So it makes sense that there's that portal with all of these darker entities who kind of thrive on the negative energy people bring to the fort. And, they'll tell you, ask permission to take a photo. I say don't ask permission ever, because it's dangerous when you're dealing with entities to ask permission.
Right.
So I always say just be respectful. And, and people who go there, it's not like someone's going to go in there and be like, oh, I took a picture and I forgot to ask. Oh, no, I'm cursed now. That doesn't happen. You know what happens? It's people who are like, yeah, screw you. I'm not going to ask permission. So it's almost every single time, it's the people who have been disrespectful that experience the curse. I found out, I'll tell you something really cool. I've been talking to Jean and Ann's niece, and she has some neat stories. And I think it was her who told me, somebody told me that Jean used to try to scare the neighborhood kids by saying the house was built on top of a cemetery or a graveyard. And I started looking in that neighborhood, and there's an old stone Methodist church that's built on top of their old cemetery. And there's St. Paul's Church built on top of their old cemetery. And then in between those, there's a theater that used to be a Baptist church, and then the auto home. So you've got church with a cemetery, auto home, church with a cemetery. And so where that theater is, that used to be the Undertaker. I'm convinced that there was a cemetery next door where the auto home was built. An ancient cemetery, like I'm talking one from probably the early to mid 1800s, because the house was built in 1898, I believe. So me and the manager there, Jessica, we went under the house and we went crawling around looking for any signs. And we found a couple of bones, that looked like really old bones. They could be animal bones. Not sure. I talked to a plumber working under there once, and he said he found what he thought was human bones. And he just said they were animal bones and threw them away. But we also found this really intricate carved piece of stone, which could be a remnant from a graveyard. So I'm thinking, if this house was built on top of a cemetery, and there's this curse being done, or these spells being placed, that could have harnessed some incredible energy from there. And I'm wondering if that's not the source of the spirit portal.
Probably. I mean, like in New Orleans, around the French Quarter, you don't have to dig very far.
Right.
They're always like if they're always finding bones and stuff, because in yellow fever and in even in the early days when, even when they just weren't sick from any kind of a plague, they used to bury them on the batures of the river. So the water would come over them. And then on the edge, every so many, miles or a little ways out of the lived-in area of the city, they bury the dead. That's how we got all those cemeteries down by Canal Boulevard and City Park and all that. That was the way the city was expanding, and that kind of marked it. There's even one that's completely covered over at the corner of St. Peter and Dauphine. That was the first cemetery in the French Quarter. So you know, it could be like what you're talking about. A lot of cemeteries stuck to the old thing of if people killed themselves, if there were suicides, unbaptized babies, criminals, they would bury them together, but outside of the consecrated area. So you may want to look into that. Like, you know, they would bury them. The old saying is they'd bury them on the north because everybody is usually buried, or used to be facing the east because that's where the resurrection's coming from. But you know, that kind of changed over time. Most of the time, they're buried with their backs to gates, you know, so they can't get out, so the dead can't get out. But on the north side of any cemetery, traditionally, old traditions is where the, you know, suicides, unbaptized infants and all criminals could be put there, but they could be put on the other side of the fence. So that house might be sitting on areas that were unconsecrated burials.
Wow.
So you might want to look
Yeah.
into that. And it's hard to
Yeah.
tell because I don't know about records for that, but it would, you know, I don't know if it would be like maybe police had records of paupers fields or something, because we've got a pauper cemetery right in the middle of the city well, near those other cemeteries called Holt, and that's a pauper's field. It still is to this day, and it always has been. And so, but back there, you know, what you're talking about with churches being there, those things might have been prevailing over, you know, their thought. I could see in the 1800s, you know, a pastor saying, no, they have to be buried outside of the consecrated area if something happens. So you might want to look into that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's I like that
you know,
theory a lot.
yeah, because that would be very unhappy dead.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You know, it just people who killed themselves or whatever and had problems, and suddenly, you know, I get it didn't matter to their spirit, obviously, but criminals, you know, miscreants, you know, killers, you know, whatever, people that were hung or whatever the execution was like around, you know, back in the history of Key West, they had to have places to put them. So yeah, you might want to look into that.
I love that. I love it.
That would be great if you could find something like that, and that would make a lot of sense because if they're digging, you know, I mean, it's like picture it: you put in this house, boom, right on top of you know, a dead pit basically, and it's just like you're driving pylons into it to build a house. You're going down into the, you know, into the angry dead.
Yeah.
I guess basically, you know, you're disturbing them. So
yeah.
But I have seen, getting back to Little Robert, I was looking at pictures, and there's like behind him, he's in his little case, and he's got pictures, like, pictures, letters, and pictures and postcards displayed behind him of people who are apologizing for, I'm sorry I did this, I'm sorry I took your picture. And then my daughter had a question for you. She's listening. She said you said you talked to him. You talked to Robert?
Yeah.
And so you sit in the museum and basically chat with him, or you just kind of keep him up?
You know, because when we're doing the tours, so, you know, I'd had the ghost tours downtown, but then I think like 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, the museum asked if I'd come and start doing tours up there. And I said, hell yeah. So what I try to do, you know, like, you know, now there's four of us who do tours there, like four different guides. And most of us have this relationship with Robert. But for me, when I was there doing them, or whenever I'm up there, I try to nurture the child's spirit. So, you know, when I'm setting up chairs for the night's tour, because we set up chairs, we set up the different ghost hunting equipment. We set up lighting, turn on ACs and stuff like that. So during that time, like I used to teach Robert to count in Spanish. And then I'd try to teach him some German. I got a little German phrase book, you know, since he was made in Germany. But I also got a book of Bahamian history, so that because I believe it's the daughter of Emmeline Abbott that's the real spirit in Robert. So I got a book of Bahamian history that I'd read to her or the doll, and you know, just to try to make that spirit stronger. because I think there's so many people going up there looking for Chucky and bringing that negative energy, and that feeds the darker entities. And I want to make the child spirit stronger. And I think it would be great if the child spirit was able to cross over one day.
David, did you ever do an EVP session with Robert?
Yeah, something that we'll do with our tours, we do one tour a night where we do the 1 hour guided tour through the fort. And about 30 minutes of that is with Robert. But then we do a VIP where we have all the equipment, and people get an extra hour at the fort. We turn off all the lights and let them loose to do their own investigations. And we'll have paranormal challenge boxes and things like that. So there's a lot of people who do the EVPs. Spirit boxes are more popular, and spirit boxes are more my thing. We've gotten some cool EVPs at the fort,
right in.
Yeah. But we get some interesting things with Robert.
I was saying, when you were talking about the child spirit, it would be great if that spirit could, be put to rest. I mean, really, and it's kind of, when you hear the story about how the doll was locked up so much and everything, you start to kind of feel sorry for him. He's just, I think, like you said, when he was in the window, he was just put there to get a better view than the attic, at the house and all. But I read that he likes peppermints, and I think I said this. I think I told it to Misty, but I heard one. I don't tell me where I saw it, but that somebody left him a peppermint, and the next morning they came in and they found the peppermint wrapper in the inside of the plexiglass thing. Like, he had eaten the peppermint, and I don't know where that was, but it stuck in my mind. I don't know. I saw it on one of the some episode about Robert the doll, but that they actually left candy for it. So that would be a thing to do. It's like, here's some candy.
Yeah. So the big problem with that, and people send him peppermints all the time, and I don't really know where that legend got started. I'd never heard this.
Yeah,
I'd never heard the story that you just said. But here's what the problem is. And there used to be a crack in his case, and people started putting all types of things through it. People were putting coins through. People were putting candies through. But then ants like sugar.
Uh-huh.
And the ants start coming in. This is to a good degree. I mean, it might as well be an open air fort. Mm-hmm. Like they have the doors open during the day, and so ants started getting into Robert's case. And it was the weirdest thing. One night, I was getting ready for the tour, and it was dark in Robert's room. I go back and I tell him, I say, all right, it's almost showtime. And as I was about to walk away, I felt like my face walked into like a big hanging cobweb covered in ants. And I felt it hit my face. I'm like, whoa. And I kind of like backed up, and I took my flashlight out and shined it on it, and there was nothing there. And then I shined it over at Robert to be like, what's up? And I saw a single ant crawling up the side of his case. And when I saw that, I looked at Robert, and I felt like I was bitten by 1,000 ants.
Wow.
I mean, it hurt so bad. It hurt my hair. My hair all stood like, it was like, ah. And it was such an awful pain. And so I went and did the tour. And then after the tour, I was talking to one of the guests, and I told him, I said, I got to tell you what happened, because I'm kind of freaked out. And I told them the whole story. And she said, oh, well, you talked about the damage on Robert's face being caused by termites. Mm-hmm. Maybe he's got ants, and ants look like termites, so they make him fearful. And he was just trying to tell you how he feels. And when she said that, an ant crawled right out of one of the holes in Robert's face.
Wow. Inside him? Yeah. Oh my God. What did you do? Did you fumigate him?
No. They have a conservation team. I put a little drop of taro, outside of his case, in the fort where I wouldn't do any damage. Mm-hmm. It's just like some of that ant bait that they'll take back to their nest to kill. But yeah, so like the whole candy thing, it's discouraged to give him candy, just
Yeah.
because if ants get in there, that could cut his life short, and we want the doll. The museum. The museum that owns Robert, they're a nonprofit museum called the Key West Art and Historical Society, and they're a great organization. I work in conjunction with them, just because I've always been into the history behind the paranormal, and they like my reputation in town. That's why they asked me to partner with them to deliver the paranormal side of things, because for them, they know the stories about Robert. They know they know about the hauntings, but their main priority is to protect him as an artifact. So they made sure that he has a new humidity controlled case with an alarm on it, and that the security is there, and that he's going to be taken care of. So they do that,
Smart.
and I'm kind of like, I'm like, I call myself and my guides doll tenders, because we tend more to the doll's spirits. We're his spiritual advisors, I guess.
I asked you what caused the holes in him because in all the pictures, but that makes sense that it would be termite because I guess he's got sawdust probably inside of him.
Yeah,
But
it's something called Excelsior. It's like a tightly spun wood wool.
mhm,
And there's termites all over Key West, probably New Orleans too. So when Myrtle
yeah.
Rooter had him, that's when he got the termite infestation.
Mm. Have you ever held him? Have you ever touched the doll?
Yeah, I've held him a few times. Now they don't bring him out of the case much at all because
Good.
it's a fragile case with the alarm. They have to contact. It's like a multi-step process. They can't disarm the alarm from within the fort. So they have to get a hold of the alarm company, and then the case is fragile, and it's a like a $15,000 or $20,000 case.
Yeah.
And the doll's fragile too. So if they were moving the case, lifting it over his head, and one of the suction cups was to fail, and it hit the doll. So they used to move him more. I think the last time he traveled, last time they took the case off was when Ozzy and Jack came to visit him. Actually, I'm wrong about that. The last time they took it off for someone was when Ozzy and Jack were there. The last time he traveled was when Zach Baggins flew him out to Las Vegas when he was opening his museum. The last time he was actually moved was during a hurricane. So when there's hurricanes, they have a safe house that they move him to, where he's protected from wind and flood.
I mean, all the paranormal aspects of it, he's an artifact, a relic of another period. I mean, she's an antique. Obviously, he should be treated. Everybody treats antique dolls with care, so I think that he should be treated that way too.
Yeah.
I read that Ozzy Osbourne had a year from hell, though, after he said he did anyway. He had when he got sick and everything after visiting Robert. Is that true?
Yeah, he blames so much of his bad luck on Robert, and yeah, I mean, because the way that he treated the real Robert, and then they took that fake Robert, the little mini stuffed Robert, they took that with them and blamed it for everything, and Ozzy tried to blow it up, and tried to microwave it. So yeah. There was an episode of The Osbournes Want to Believe where Jack pulls out the miniature. Robert shows it to Ozzy, and I was like, "Get that thing the hell away from me! That thing ruined my life."
Oh.
He came in with all his spirits. They got mad at the other spirits. I don't know. I mean, he's gone. Ozzy is just gone. I guess.
He's still doing stuff. God, they're still doing like podcasts.
I know.
I mean, he's I tell you, he's amazing. All the stuff that he's doing.
They roll him out, or shuffle him on out there. I don't know.
Yeah,
his mind's gone.
He says, I guess they've got a Black Sabbath bench that they dedicated in Birmingham, in England, where he was from. And he said, I'm going to get out there. And he's just nominated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo artist. And I think it would be incredible to see him get up and play there one last time.
Because the band Black Sabbath was years ago, I guess they put in there. I don't know. Now, you could send that relic doll to Alice Cooper. Send it to Alice,
Yeah.
Alice is still traveling too. Dean, I wanted to bring you in. You might have some questions for David, so I wanted to let you come on in here.
Yeah, I find it pretty awesome that the bed and breakfasts and businesses actually talk to you, about their hauntings and let you do tours and stuff and speak on the history. Because a lot of times, businesses and bed and breakfasts, especially, most of them won't want to be known as a haunted place.
Mm.
And being from Louisiana, in Louisiana, I find it strange that a lot of them they they don't want to talk to us because they don't want to be known as a haunted bed and breakfast, which everybody already knows the history. So some of them, they've told me, some of them feel that if they were known as a haunted bed and breakfast or haunted business, they would lose business, which I don't agree with that because being from Louisiana, a lot of places are haunted.
Yeah, and I think so many people do look for something haunted. Yeah, and I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it go both ways. At the artist house, there have been. I've seen it sold maybe 7 or 8 times,
Hmm.
and most of the owners embrace it, but it's all on different levels. And there have been there were some owners who were like, absolutely, don't talk about it. And I think it
Right.
might just be a reflection of their personal beliefs. Uh, I'm not really sure, but you know, I find that so many people do want to stay in a haunted location, and I actually created a haunted directory for Key West, like a free online directory that lists the haunted bed and breakfasts, bars, restaurants, museums. It's got a full listing of all the different cemeteries, so that way people who are seeking it out can find it. And I haven't had anybody ask to be removed from it. Because I think most people realize how good it is for business. And it's funny because I've seen some places where they're not haunted. You see people who are just trying to get business by saying, "Oh, why don't you bring your tour by here? I've got a ghost."
Super
Create a
excited
ghost to get
when you show
business.
up.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, David. Tell us some of your personal paranormal experiences. Like, have you been followed home by spirits? Have you had strange things happen to you since, well, you've been in this for a while, but have you had some things going on that,
Oh
you
yeah, I
know,
mean I've been through hell through the years. I mean, I've been doing it for I think 26 years. I've been scratched. I've been yanked out of bed. Uh, to me, some of the weirdest though, like um, when a ghost walks through you,
Mm.
I always think that's really weird because you can't. I mean, you can imagine what it's going to be like, but when it's happened, like when they actually like walk right through you, um, it's like ice water being pushed through you, and it travels at different speeds because it goes through your skin faster than it goes through your bone or your tendons. So it's almost like it's pushing and pulling at the same time to get through the different parts of your body, and it's just so bizarre. Uh, and that's only happened to me a couple of times, but I mean, I've had some things where where I was just pretty much terrified, and it's usually like not right at the moment because your brain's just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. But then once I've realized, and for me that's always been the worst because once the fear gets in, they can use that power to get to you. And so I've had some dark periods because of that, because these things would attach to me, and I'd tell people to cleanse, but I never do it myself because I don't know if I had an ego or if I just thought they might like me and not wouldn't do anything bad to me. But I've had times where I've had to stop doing tours. I've had times when I've had to convince myself, like no, none of it's real. There's no such thing as ghosts, even though I could never explain all the weird things that happened to me. Just from my own mental health, it was like, no, this is just more than I can more than I can grasp.
Mhm.
But
Spiritual protection is very important.
it is, and And I regret the times that that I took that for granted. But I'll tell you something really cool that happened, and this was in the theater that used to be the church next to the Otto family home. We were there one night, and I think we had like 30 people on the tour, and it was an abandoned theater at the time. So like nobody had been in it for years, and we're standing there, and somebody looks back and they're like, "What's that? What's that?" And I turn around and look. There was like this big ball of cotton, like moving down the center aisle of the theater, approaching us. And as it got closer, it took on the form of a little girl. Wearing a little dress and little shoes. And the people who could see it, they're like, what the? They're like, oh my God. And then some of the people in the group weren't seeing it. And they're like, what? And the people who could see it are like, shut up. And, I was right by the glass of the door, and I turned around, I'm looking. This little girl came up. She was, inches away from my face, but still on the other side of the door. And she couldn't see me. She looked right through me, right through all the people there. And it's like she was just looking out at the street. And she stood there for maybe 15 seconds and then turned around, started walking back down that aisle and turned back into this mist or this ball and disappeared. And what I found was really weird is that about half the group could see her and half the group could not.
That's wild. People go their whole careers in paranormal investigation looking for something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I was trying to figure out, like, why did some people see her and why did some people not? And because none of them were lying. The different people who weren't together saw and described the same thing. And so what I think happens, that's why I think like frequencies are real important. I think there's a paranormal frequency, and different things can get us to tune into that frequency. So, it's almost like we're a radio dial. And if we share a car, I've got my preset station with heavy metal on it. You've got your preset station with country music. And if I get in and push my button and hear the heavy metal and you tell me, oh, there's country music playing in this car, I'd be like, you're insane. There's no country music. But those waves would still be coming through. I'm just not tuned into them. Mm-hmm. So I think the same thing happens with the paranormal. And I think people can, unfortunately, I think that the paranormal connection, I think the paranormal stations are probably like, right down close to the ones with people who are deemed insane, or people under the influence of drugs or alcohol. I think they're all very close frequencies. And, so when I see crazy people who are talking to someone, I don't doubt that they're tuned in to a frequency where there are people there.
But they're interacting with something. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, people who don't see it, I think, maybe it's just like, maybe their dial's broken. Maybe it's just stuck in the middle and won't go all the way down.
Yeah, they're stuck on some, I don't know, AM station. You know how when you're traveling, you only the country stations will come in.
Yep.
On your radio, you're traveling in the stations. Why can't you can't get the rock station, you can't get the oldie station. You can either get the Bible all day station or the readings for the blind station or some country, and it's not the good country. It's some rinky-dink country station. No matter where you go, it's like, how come I can't get anything else to tune in? So now we've got it. We can listen to anything we want, obviously, in our car, but it used to be odd. It was like, well, because they have the biggest antenna or something, it's some AM, whatever. And now if you get off into that, it's all kind of creepy stuff too. But so what's coming up? What's next for you? You're going to write another book? You're working on new tours, or what's going on?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. And you never know. I've got several books that I want to do, and I'm working on little bits of them at a time. But I'd love to share more stories about the hauntings at the 40s Martello. So it would be cool to get a book out about that. What I'm really excited for right now. So we started doing tours at the old haunted firehouse in Key West. It's this really cool firehouse, and it's great. Most of the tours that I do we team up with nonprofit organizations. Um, so so all the tickets are going to a good cause.
Mhm.
Awesome.
You know, I mean, I'm still a for-profit tour, but you know, a percentage of the money is going to these organizations, which can really help with what they're doing. I think last year we made over $100,000 for local nonprofits with the ghost tours. So Firehouse is really cool. That's an exciting one, but hopefully sometime this year or early next year, the old jail in Key West is going to open up as a museum, and it's going to be the same nonprofit that runs the fort where Robert is.
Hmm.
In this jail, that's where they had the sanctioned hangings. There have been suicides, lynchings, murders, all of these things behind the walls. The jail goes back to 1892. That's where von Cosel was put in jail. It's probably the darkest haunted location in Key West, without doubt, in the Florida Keys, maybe even in all of Florida. So I'm really anxious to get in there. I had a.
Yeah, I can like it. Sounds like you're so excited.
I am. I have a friend. Her husband's a cop, and they get a call to go there about some kind of an alarm, and they said that they got there, and the door was open. They went in and went up to the second floor, and they cleared it where there were no humans there, and then they heard something following them. And he said he got so freaked out that he was like, "Whoa, no!" And they just ran. And I talked to one of the guys who's doing a lot of the painting and repairs and stuff like that. And he says after everybody else leaves, when he's in there alone, as he's walking around, something will start following him, and it'll start like making noises behind him to let him know it's there, and it'll start getting closer and closer and closer. He says right when he gets by one of the jail cells, the thing will growl in his ear.
Ooh.
And I said to him, I said, I wonder if you look like one of the wardens. And he said, oh, I used to be a corrections officer.
Oh.
I said, oh, they know. And there's this tree. There's a really cool tree. If you ever go to Key West, you'll see it right by the courthouse. It's an old kapok tree. And they say that these kapok trees connected the worlds of the living and the dead, you know, because of the way their branches go up and the way their giant roots go down. And this tree, when you look at it, you see handprints and faces growing in the bark. And
Wow.
they move over time, because I've seen some, and then I've taken somebody back to show it to them, and it won't be there, and they'll see something in a different place. And it's. I'm sorry. Say that again.
How old is the tree?
I'm trying to date the tree. You know, like you look at old photos. There's an account that dated it to the early 1900s. But I think they were mistaken on the tree they were talking about, because there's another kapok tree which matched that date. So that's still ongoing to try to figure it out. But my thoughts are it was probably planted around the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was planted shortly after Manuel Cabeza was lynched from the jail by the Klan. And because within the Spanish culture, the kapok tree is a great tree to use during spells.
I'm looking at a picture of it now. I went and looked on my phone. Those things are weird.
Yeah.
Weird. Yeah, like it has a skirt of roots and then it goes into the earth. Whoa.
Yeah, it's an incredible tree. But I think it was planted to use in Santeria rituals. And I don't think it's any mistake it was planted in front of the courthouse, because there's a lot of Santeria that goes on in the courthouse for favorable outcomes.
That's wild. That is wild. So you see faces and everything in it. Oh gosh.
Yeah. It's weird. And and I think you could look at any tree, and if you look hard enough, and use enough imagination, you'll see faces. But some of the hands that you see on this one is just like, what? And then the fact that they're there and then they're not there. So I'm looking forward to investigating that whole place.
Do a YouTube channel.
Right?
Do videos. Yeah, you should. Haunted Key West.
Yeah, we do one with the Robert the Doll Experience. We did a few videos on that, and then it's just I'm not real good at documenting stuff. I love being there and experiencing it, but then when it comes to if it comes to filming it and editing it and posting it, I don't know.
You just want to be the star. That's what it is.
I just love being with the spirits and bringing them out and experiencing them. So,
well, I think Robert and all the spirits on Key West have a good caretaker in you. Dean, you're going to have to go down there.
Yeah.
You're going to have to go and do an investigation. Go meet Robert.
Yeah.
You see, I'm volunteering Dean, not me.
You both need to come down.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. And when you said this is what is it, that mile marker or the lowest point, the furthest point in the U.S., I can picture people I've seen on Facebook. Here we are in Key West at this thing, and then standing all over dead people. That's just great. What is it called? It's the furthest
point.
Yeah, furthermost
point. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're all smiling and all. Now I have something to tell them. Yeah, well, you're standing on a bunch of dead people.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we want to have you back too when you get into the jail and you get some other stuff going. We want to have you back on our show because that sounds awesome.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Maybe we can maybe do something in New Orleans too. I love New Orleans. Me and I actually my friend Loretta wrote the New Orleans bucket list. I published different bucket list books. So we had the best time going to New Orleans and going through everything in the New Orleans bucket list. It's such an incredible town.
What was the bucket list?
I'm sorry, say that again. You broke up.
I'm sorry. So tell us real quick what was on the bucket list.
Oh, there's 100 things, and it tends to go more towards the offbeat. So I mean, it's just some really cool stuff. Of course, like the Vampire Speakeasy. And the stuff that I remember is all the cool ghostly stuff. But it covers all different aspects. They sell it at what's the is there a store there called Forever New Orleans or Forever?
Yeah,
Forever New Orleans sells it.
Is it available on Amazon?
It's available on Amazon. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All of my books are on Amazon, and with that one, her name's Loretta Adkins.
Okay.
But the New Orleans bucket list, it'll show up.
Cool. Yeah. I can just I want to see what it is now. Being from New Orleans, I want to see if you got all the good stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
you're gonna have to do another one though. South Louisiana. Louisiana has the loup-garou and all that. Take him out in the swamp, Dean.
I've done them for Key West and for Fort Lauderdale and Florida Keys, and my wife did them for Pittsburgh, where her family is, and so they're fun. They're fun books because for me, all the different guidebooks that I don't know, they're either too flowery or don't have enough info. So this one's like a good fun read with offbeat things. That's kind of the format that we try to do. And Loretta, she's like, she's big New Orleans. So
the best way. People look for weird stuff like that. They want to travel the old highways and stay away, stay off of the interstates, and you got to be careful in New Orleans, but in the rest of the state, they want to go out into the country and the hinterlands and all. So that's when you end up in the swamps, and if you don't find an alligator, you might find the Honey Island swamp monster or the loup-garou or whatever.
Oh my God, I love it! I've got so much that I want to learn about New Orleans. I mean, it's such an incredible place.
All right, well, David, we're gonna let you go, but thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate it. It was great talking to you.
It has been so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime, and we'd love to have you back.
All right. Sounds,
All right.
sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, you take it easy, and we will talk to you again soon, hopefully.
Yes. Good night.
Okay. All right. Good night, David. Well, I'm less scared about Robert the doll a little bit now.
Yeah, I
So
kind of feel sorry for Robert now.
I do feel sorry for Robert.
Now
Stuck in
he's
a
in
box.
jail.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I've heard some terrible stories about it, but it doesn't, when you hear the whole story, behind it and him being locked up and, I guess, and I forgot to ask him. I wanted to ask him, but I think the clothes he wears, the doll wears, belong to Eugene Otto. So it was his little sailor suit that they put him in and everything. So, but yeah, here we are making plans. We're going to have to do that once and film it for YouTube or whatever. I'll be behind the camera. You can be in front.
Okay.
All right. Well, we're gonna get on out of here. That was great. So hopefully everybody enjoys it. And again, you're listening to the Supernatural Substation. I'm Eileen Pastanio, and that's my friend Bernadine Richardson doing her thing over there. And again, if you like us, please like, subscribe, share, because that's how we grow our channel. And we'll be back next week with another great guest, right, Bernadine?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, y'all have a good weekend, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.